this Tuesday?
I'm doing well, Asanda. Hope you are well in South Africa.
We're well, thank you very much. And we always look forward to having these catch up sessions with you on Tuesdays. And today we start with your home country, Kenya. And Kenya getting or the UK rather, compensating Kenyans that were affected by a 2021 military fire. Can you take us back into what caused this wildfire and the kind of devastation it left behind?
Thank you so much, Asanda. Of course, finally, after 4 years, when there was a devastating fire outbreak in the British training camp in Laikipia, and now the UK government has agreed to pay the compensation for thousands of Kenyans who were affected by fire that was caused by a military exercise 4 years ago. Of course, this is out of a court settlement that follows a length legal battle in which 7,723 claimants said they had lost property and suffered a health complication because of the 2021 fire in the Lola Daiga Conservancy in Kenya's Rift Valley. Of course, this is a region where the British soldiers have been training for years. Of course, through the spokesman of the British High Commission in Nairobi, quote in quote, say that he accepts the responsibility of the fire, and that's why the compensation had been paid, adding that it was the right to do so. Of course, we do not have a clear confirmation of the amount, the amount of money that was paid, but according to the lawyers in the case, say that around 2.9 million US dollars were paid, and of course the compensation was generous and fair. This is based on the rigorous assessment. This is by the spokesman of the British High Commission. I remember the lawyer representing the over 7,000 claimants, Kevin Kubai, called it the best possible outcome, despite the complaint from the complaint from the clients that got the sum they received were too small to compensate. Remember, Asanda, during the fire outbreak, it was really difficult to ascertain to what level the complainants were affected, because the fire outbreak took place in the training region in Aloi Daiga, and some of them complained that saying that they inhale a smoke that really affected the health. But remember, there were no documents to really ascertain to what level the inhalation affected them. Remember, the Lodaiga Conservancy, which is about 49,000 acres of hilly bushland with backdrop of ice kept from Mount Kenya. It is part of the Laikipia's plateau, where hundreds of thousands of acres were saved by the British during the colonial era, leading to land dispute that we've been witnessing until now. And Asanda, of course, this is one of its kind, compensation. Remember, we've had, issues, complaint from locals about the British Army. Remember, some years ago, we have had issues of sexual violence, murder that is being done by the British soldiers at the Batuk in Nyati facility that is owned by the British government.
So, as you say, there's been complaints for those who are still within the area that there's air pollution. But in terms of further environmental damage, has the area been cleared for that? And also, how long will it take then for the air pollution to be addressed, that issue?
Remember, this is a 70 kilometer, that is about 45 miles from the Lewa Conservancy. And Asanda, this is an area that is a military zone area, meaning that it will not be cleared because there are no inhabitants in this region because it was set aside by the government of British. Remember, this land was acquired during the colonial era, and it has been used as a training facility for thousands of British soldiers who train in this facility. And of course, we've been having the joint military exercise between the British soldiers and the Kenyan army in the area. So the area has not been cleared because it is a military zone that it is being operated by the British soldiers in the region.
So, in terms of conservation in Kenya, what does this mean then? The case, is it a celebration? Because, as you say, the area was a conserved conservation area. It was affected as a protected conservancy. What does it mean then for conservation in the country and other environmental laws and environmentalists?
Of course, Asanda, for the conversation purposes, of course, during the case, we saw so many environmental activists, coming out, calling out the British Army to take full responsibility for the huge acres of land that were raised down by fire that was caused by a stove that was knocked down by a military gadget. Of course, and now moving forward, of course, now we've seen these, and we've seen this call by the activists that, of course, there must be compensation in that regard. But remember, the British embassy confirmed that they only compensated over 7,000 inhabitants or claimants who resides within that zone.
Let's move to Somalia now, where 3 former presidents have gathered to share a call, and they're speaking out against the land misuse there and forced evictions. The presidents say that this is unlawful appropriation. Why do they say that?
Of course, Asanda, this is very unprecedented joint statement by the 3 surviving ex-presidents. That is Sharif, Sheikh Ahmed Abdi Qasim Salad Hassan, and the recent President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo. Of course, they have strongly denounced the President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud government for what they characterize as the unlawful appropriation and sale of public land. Of course, they accuse the administration of orchestrating land transfers without the adequate oversight or legal protocol. Of course, noting that many of the disposal occurred without recognizing the surplus status. And the proceeds of these state treasury, of course, that is now through the National Contracts Agency. And their joint letter also argued that, the businesses and the public to abstain from supporting or purchasing illegally transferred property, labeling such deals as a legitimate and high risk. Of course, Somalia's civil society and political analysts have welcomed the intervention, calling it a powerful call for the governance accountability. Remember, the 3 surviving presidents have publicly united in criticizing, of course, signaling a deep institutional concern over land governance and its implication for Somalia's fragile stability. Of course, the regions in question here is the eviction of Atarambuka, a region where we saw clashes erupted between security functions. Of course, this is as emblematic to the danger or overreach. And of course, this call comes at a time when Somalia is still battling, the jihadist groups, and of course, they were saying that, of course, through the letter that the real issues that government should be focusing on, rather than selling a public land that might also see chaos erupt as a result of that issue.
All right, let's move to Ethiopia now. Ethiopian Airlines is still unable to recover its funds that are frozen in Eritrea. In what ways has this freezing of funds affected Ethiopian Airlines?
Of course, the Ethiopian airline remains locked in a dispute that span over 2 years. This is a frozen funds in Eritrea and has not recovered the money. The current chief executive officer confirming that all court efforts, of course, have been failed, and the matter now sits squarely with the political arena. Of course, this is not the right approach. Of course, the standoff, which has dragged into the second year already, forced the suspension of the all flights to Asmara, the capital of Eritrea. That is since that September 2024, and continues to disrupt the travel for families, the businesses, and of course students who use these vital link between the two capitals. Of course, Asanda, this comes at a time, of course, that we've had issues that has been witnessed for between the two countries. Of course, the political tension between Eritrea and of course Ethiopia, and we've seen in cases whereby there are political and totally we've seen that there are no businesses between taking place between the two countries because of the linkage that is Asmara and Addis Ababa through the open airline. Of course, the disputes frozen accounts contested here is about 3 million US dollar for alleged unpaid services lost. A baggage claim, it says goes back to more than 2 decades ago, and this is now an excuse that the Eritrean government or Eritrean airline is now coming up with, and the Ethiopian airline says that just give us back our accounts. We need to access our bank accounts so that we can continue with business as it has been before.
Is it a purely business decision, this freezing of funds, or is it a political one? As the two countries have had strained relations for about 2 decades now.
Of course, this is business, and some of the commentators are saying that, of course, let it be handled business-wise, but not political-wise, because we've had tension. Remember, for the past we've had issue over 20 years ago between the two countries, and of course we still have the tension between the two countries, especially the border between Ethiopia and Eritrea. And remember, recently we've had tensions where the two countries are at the loggerhead, trying to to show that we still have the military prowess over you. And of course, Ethiopian Airline reported despite all these conversation, all these the frozen accounts, we've seen Ethiopian Airline record over 7.6 billion US dollar in the fiscal year that is ended June 30th, which is an 8% rise on year to year. Of course, absorbing 28 million loss in the domestic operation due to currency devaluation
Before
and
we
high
completely
costs.
run out of time, sorry to cut you there, Dennis, I want to touch on South Sudan just briefly for about a minute. The political stability in that country is facing renewed strain, and this is as calls grow to replace first Vice President Riek Machar with Stephen Parkour, who is leader of a breakaway SPLIO faction. What can you tell us there?
Of course, thank you so much, Asanda. This is a very critical issue in South Sudan at the moment, whereby, of course, we had, a bit of stability in the country, but now we have now renewed the strain after General Hamis Abdelatif Chowolom urged President Salva Kiir Mayardit to replace Vice President Riek Machar with Stephen Parkwall, leader of a breakaway SPLM-IO faction. Of course, Machar, who is an architect of a 2018 peace accord, has been under house arrest since March over an ongoing criminal investigation, a move that has deepened division within the party. Of course, in April, SPLM-IO splintered with Call Juba-based faction pledging to work with Kir, while Machar royalists rallied around the deputy, who is Oyet Nathaniel. Of course, General Hamis, once a member of the Riek Machar SPLM, OL, has now aligned with Kir, argued that the Qual's leadership is essential to safeguarding the peace agreement. Of course, he warned that the delays in decision-making will embolden international actors to intervene, stressing that only swift action such as appointing a Kohl as vice president and recognizing allies will preserve the country's fragile political balance. Remember, we've had tension in the country among the warring faction. Of course, there are still tensions between the supporters of Riek Machar, whom people say that, of course, it is very unfair for him to be under house arrest, yet is the architect of the peace accord
Dennis,
that was signed in 2018 between Machar and Salva Kiir.
We're going to leave it there for today. And again, we appreciate your time. Have a great day, Dennis.
Thank you so much, Asanda.
Thank you. Dennis Beru is journalist and team leader at Grassroot Journalism Kenya, giving us our East Africa wrap. Let's go to news headlines now. Here's Onele Nzinzi.
SABC